The world is becoming increasingly proficient at telling stories that deny God. As such, we need Thinking Christian to become as natural as breathing. Welcome to the Thinking Christian podcast. I'm Dr. James Spencer. Through calm, thoughtful, theological discussions, Thinking Christian highlights the ways God is working in the world and questions the underlying social, cultural, and political assumptions that hinder Christians from becoming more like Christ. Now, on to today's episode of Thinking Christian. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Thinking Christian. I'm Dr. James Spencer, and I am joined today by Amy L. Williams. And Amy is the author of Worth Seeing. It's a book published by IVP, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that book. But Amy is also known as the hope dealer to the dope dealer. She ministers to teens involved in gangs across the Chicagoland area. She's a certified gang intervention specialist, and she also serves as a project coordinator for New Life Centers, bringing in restorative justice programming to youth at juvenile prisons. She's also been a youth pastor, a reentry coordinator, and a youth mentor and advocate. And so a lot of work with youth. And I'm excited to be talking with you. I really enjoyed the book, Amy. So welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you give people, I think one of the things I really enjoyed about the book was just your story of how you got into youth work, how you got into even Chicago, because you weren't originally from Chicago.
Exactly. Born and raised in Maine. You don't hear that often.
You don't.
And then and then moved to North Carolina, and then have been in Chicago the last 20 something years, but have been doing youth ministry for 30 years. So that started in North Carolina through Urban Young Life. My ex-husband and I did ministry with kids in the city of Durham, if you can say that, of Durham, North Carolina. Worked with the marginalized community, and then eventually found myself in Chicago working with kids and gangs in the prison system, mostly motivated by my baby brother, who he himself was gang involved and in the justice system at a time when there was nothing that I can do. Now I'm at the age where I can do something. I have the resources, and I'm going to impact those lives as much as I can.
That's awesome. Well, talk a little bit about, you wrote this book, Worth Seeing.
Yes.
And in the first chapter, I believe it was, you talk a little bit about the Hagar Ishmael narrative, where, it's God is the God who sees. How is that sort of an anchor text for what you're talking about in the book? How does that inform your understanding of being worth seeing?
Yeah, so the book is titled Worth Seeing, Viewing Others Through God's Eyes, right?
Okay.
And so the story of Hagar is about the God that sees. Often we think that God is involved in what we're doing. Often God may not particularly be so hands-on. And I think the story of Hagar lets you know God is intimately, deeply connected, and he sees you regardless of your situation, what you're going through, where you are, what you've done, right? He really cares about you individually. And this book is about being able to see others in that vein, not only just yourself, but really taking the time to humanize others that are on the margins that people tend to ignore, and say there is a God that sees you, but we also need to understand there's a God that sees them as well.
Yeah. So when you think about being worth seeing, like you talk about in the book, this experience of, I believe it was you ended up going to a Hispanic church, if I'm recalling that correctly.
That is
Can you
correct.
talk just a little bit about that? Like give people a sense of how that sort of informed your understanding what you're talking about in the book.
Well, it's very interesting. So I'm biracial. I'm half Black and half Irish, but everybody thinks I'm Puerto Rican. And so moved to Chicago, so I call myself sorta Rican. I'm not Puerto Rican. I'm sorta Rican.
That's fantastic.
And so moved into a predominantly Puerto Rican community and attended a church there. I became a youth pastor at this church and was just on fire for this particular population of young people. But I was so on fire that I was told by the pastor that I needed to kind of calm myself down, tone it down a little bit so that others would be able to fully accept me. That makes absolutely no sense to me. And especially fighting my whole entire life to be seen and
Yeah.
accepted as someone who was biracial in a time where there weren't a lot of biracial children. Going to this church telling me I needed to be less of who I was made me not feel seen, made me
Yeah.
wonder if there is a God that sees me. Because if the pastor doesn't fully see me, if a congregation doesn't fully see me, how is there a God that can fully see me? And so that church got a lesser version of me.
Mm.
And that
No,
was
you,
very painful.
yeah. It's interesting because one of the things you mentioned in there in the book is talking about hope. And I know I
Mhm.
want you to talk a little bit about your brand, right? The Hope Dealer. But one of the things you noted was one of the ways to give these kids hope is to draw them into a new environment with new people and new opportunities. Oh, I think what struck me about your narration of your experience in that Latino church is that it's not every new people experience or environment and opportunity that really helps these kids. It has to be a particular sort of new people, new environment, new opportunity. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it has to be a group of people that are willing to see these kids
Yeah.
beyond what they're presenting to us, right? And being
Yeah.
able to take the time and listen to the stories. I always say, if you heard the stories of my young people, you would understand why they joined a gang and how they ended up in prison. But a lot of times we just make these assumptions without really listening to the stories. And so knowing the stories, knowing who they are, knowing where they're going helps us to then better pick which opportunities and new spaces to invite our young people into, and knowing who to connect them with, right? So you can't connect every young person with particular opportunities that may just see them as troublemakers, but absolutely see them as an asset to our communities.
And so when we're talking about understanding the stories of these young people,
Mhm.
I'm guessing it's you have to have the right context to really understand that story. You're kind of immersed in this.
Right.
As someone who's not immersed in this, how would you suggest somebody like me going about that? Like, what does that look like for, you just your everyday Christian to begin getting immersed into some of these folks' stories?
Sure. The first one I would say is buy my book. There are nothing but stories,
That's right.
right,
Yes.
of these young people to give you a better understanding
Yeah.
and develop some compassion in that. My book is about humanizing the story. There are tons of books out there by Father Greg Boyle. He has books with nothing but stories. There are documentaries, right, that you can watch, that you can participate in. Talk to your youth pastor. They're connected and involved with hopefully young people on the margins or just young people, period, right? In my book, I talk about what young people are at risk. All young people are at risk, right? But there's a higher a subset of those youth that are at higher risk. But every young person is at risk. Every young person has a story. And so get to know through the youth pastor and simply just talk to a kid. If you see a kid walking down the street, say hi. Spark up a conversation with some youth that are in your church or in your community. There are many ways to connect and hear the stories of young people on the margins.
Mm.
I have movies I can recommend to watch, right? Like Freedom
Yeah.
Riders, Dangerous Minds, like there
Yeah.
Coach Carter. There are tons of movies that will show you as well, beside the documentaries that will give you an inside look into the life of marginalized youth.
Yeah, you mentioned Freedom Riders in the book, and I love that
Yeah,
movie. I thought it was a great
love
reference.
that movie.
Like sometimes when I'm watching some of the movies, I'm like, is this too dramatized? Is this giving me
Mm.
a fake picture of what's going on here?
And
But
sometimes it does. I think you're
yeah,
right to be cautious about that, right? A lot
yeah,
of it is, but a lot of it isn't. It's very much true to the stories of trauma that our young people experience, what communities and neighborhoods may look like, experiences they may have being involved in gangs. But a lot of it is hyped up, definitely, but it can still give you a little bit of insight,
yeah, yeah.
uh, if you just, pray about it before you watch
Now, my touch point with this, obviously, I mentioned before our interview, my wife and I had lived up in Chicago for a while,
it.
but I think my real primary touch point with this, my wife always kids me, I'm not kid friendly. I don't, I don't like children. Once they get up to be teenagers, I'm far
Yeah,
better at it. I once they can kind of have an intelligible conversation, I'm much better. But
right,
yeah, little
right.
kids, they almost like freak me out. But anyway,
They're not
um,
for everybody.
they are not very like, God bless you for being a youth minister.
Right. And I
Yeah,
say that about people that work with babies. I'm like, God bless you for working
yeah,
with babies or
that's
working with
right.
girls or middle
Definitely,
school
yeah.
kids. Right, right, right. Give me high school kids and young adults. That's my
Yeah.
lane.
Yeah, I did junior high ministry for a little while, and
Woo,
I
God
think,
bless you.
yeah, it was a probably a mistake for everyone involved. Uh, but but here's what I would say. I I found it really challenging. I'd just be interested to hear you comment on this, but I found it really challenging to try to work with the kids when their parents were against us working with the kids.
Yes.
So in other words, it's like in junior high, and I was completely untrained. This is why I was saying it's a mistake. So anybody listening, like, don't don't think that I know what I'm doing. I was just a warm body that they threw at this thing. Um, but like the kids would not listen in the classroom, especially the boys. They'd wrestle each other, and I could say, "Hey, get off! Stop doing that," or whatever. But my impression was, you can't just manhandle these kids. It's probably not the smartest idea.
No,
And
no.
so like if they're not listening, what's my option here? Right. And so then the parents would come back and they'd be frustrated that their kids were all hot and sweaty or, had a rug burn or something like that. And I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do. When I
Right.
tell them not to do it, they continue to do it. You don't want me, physically removing them.
No.
And so how do we work together on this? There wasn't an interest really in working together. It was more like they wanted youth ministry or junior high ministry to be babysitting my kid while I'm in
Babysitting.
church.
Right, right.
So I I've also had some of those experiences in foster care. My wife and I have done foster care an awful
Mm,
lot. Safe Families, if
mm.
you're familiar with Safe
Yes,
Families.
yes.
So we've done that as well. And those come with their own different set of complications. They're usually a little more temporary. But you also still have pretty heavy influence, at least in our experience, from
Yeah,
parents.
yeah.
And so how do you, having done this for a long time, how do you navigate some of those things where you're trying to push them one way, understand their lives, help them reorient, to the world a bit, when other voices who are pretty influential in their lives are pushing them in a different direction?
And I think that is very typical of the work that I do.
Okay.
And we try very hard to partner with the parents. It is very important for us to understand where they're coming from, what they want for their child, what they don't want for their child. And those relationships are not always successful.
Okay.
I mean, at some point, you just have to just say, this isn't going to work. And it bless that child for being put in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So when a child is put in the middle of it and we're saying, come on, let's go to school. And the parents are like, I don't care if you go to school. I don't care what you do. Or you need to get a job instead of going to school. Oh, I just hate having a child be put in that kind of situation. And
Yeah.
so what we have to do is we have to do what is best and what's safest for the child. Um, you have to still walk life with them, but let that child ultimately make it their own decisions on what they're going to do and how they're going to follow through, right?
Yeah.
I always say, I work mostly with older kids, and we tell them, you're the hero of your own life. You're the hero of this story. And your parents are telling you not to go to school. What do you want for your life? And then how can we come alongside and support you with the decision that you made? Um, Most of the time our relationships with the parents are successful because they don't want their kid going back to prison. They don't want
Yeah.
their child in gangs. And so a lot of times our relationships are successful, but for those that aren't, we don't abandon the kid. We try as much as we can to be a support based on the decisions that they want to make. It's a very complex and difficult situation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
it is.
yeah, it's good to know it wasn't just me. So I appreciate that.
No, at all. I mean, I was a youth pastor for years, and I would do monthly meetings with parents, so I could say, this is what we're going to go over this month. This is what I need you to do with your children while we're learning these things. And very few parents would show up to those
Mm,
meetings.
yeah.
So they were looking for babysitting too. And I wasn't going to be that babysitter. So
Yeah.
very challenging. A lot of
And
ministries deal with that.
I'm guessing, I mean, obviously the parents have their own stories too.
Sure.
You know,
They have their own
and
trauma and they have their own,
right, it's
all of
sort of,
that.
just infinite regression kind of idea. It's like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
all just sort of passed down almost in a hereditary fashion. And so
exactly.
I, I suppose that's where maybe, I suppose that's where your faith, the Christian focus side of things comes in.
Yeah.
If I think I recall you, in the book suggesting that you ask where our hope is really, where you really put your hope in.
Where you really put your hope in.
Yeah.
And our only hope is in Jesus. Is we can't put our hope in
Yeah.
man, because we're very fickle
Yeah.
humans. Um, 1 minute we're happy, the next minute we're mad, the next minute we're excited, and then the next minute we're depressed. And I mean, just hope is about stability, right? And in knowing.
Yeah.
And so our only hope is scripture and Psalm. Our only hope can be found in you, in the Lord.
You know, one of the aspects that I really liked about the book was the perception pyramid. I've done a fair
Mm,
amount of work on like collective remembering and attention and those kind of things. And so
yeah.
the perception pyramid really resonated with me. Um, and I saw it, maybe I saw it going both ways. So
Mm,
I think you deal with it in the book more like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but almost more like the way we behave is going to influence the way people perceive us to some
right.
degree. But also, I think that, our own baggage influences the way we see other people.
Absolutely. We have a very limited lens,
Yeah.
right? And we see and perceive things through our experiences. And that's like the quote where we don't see people as they are, we see them as we are. We
Yeah.
see them through our lens, which is not necessarily the full truth.
Right. It's really interesting. I go back to this story an awful lot, but I think it's just so helpful. At least it clarified a lot for me. My wife and I were taking a walk. We were up visiting Chicago. This was after we moved downstate. We were up visiting Chicago. It was about like 10:30, 11 o'clock, and we decided to take a walk. And she just made the comment. She's like, "This isn't something I normally do when I travel by myself. Gonna
Mm-hmm.
walk around the city by myself."
Right.
And I had never even given it a second thought. Like it didn't, you know what I mean? I wouldn't,
Mm-hmm.
I would have gone out by myself at 10:30 at night or 11 or whatever if I felt like taking a walk and we would go out. But
Wow.
it just reminded me, I'm like, oh, there's a different sort of focus and attention that she has to give to, let's say, her safety or her
Mm-hmm.
surroundings
Mm-hmm.
than I normally have to. And
Right.
it's not like I'm completely oblivious. It's just, I guess I can walk around making the assumption. This is sort of where I came to. It's like I just generally assume I'm not the easiest target.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what I'm wondering is if you've seen or found that pictures that we often associate with gangs and troubled youth and people who've been in prison and those kind of things tend to narrow our perception even more.
Sure.
That people are super guarded about it because they're just not, all they're concerned with is their vulnerability.
And their safety. Yeah.
And so that then sort of creates this little tunnel vision, and this is how they're going to see people.
Absolutely. And I think, you make a very good point. What is the narrative that's out there? What is the
Yeah.
narrative that people are hearing and listening to? And when you constantly hear and see the same narrative,
Yeah.
especially like in Chicago, right? All we see our
Yeah.
black and brown bodies on TV being shot, being killed, doing the shooting, doing the killing. What is the narrative that you're taking in?
Yeah.
And that's why it's takes extra work to be able
Yeah.
to see through the lens of God, right?
Yeah.
To be able to see people through the lens of God when all we're being thrown at is this one narrative. So yeah, you're absolutely correct. It does narrow the truth, our perception.
Yeah. And I'm wondering how, like, when you're working with these youth, do you try to help them understand that from the other people's side, like develop an empathy for the people who aren't interacting with them?
Not
That
necessarily.
okay. I just wondered. Yeah.
Because I'm just trying to help them get through and survive and accept themselves,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like we may
Yeah.
talk about this is how someone perceives you, but that's not my main focus. My main
Okay.
focus is how do you perceive yourself, right?
Okay.
How are you dealing with trauma? What are you learning about who you are and what's
Yeah.
going on? Because they already know how the world looks at them.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
they know that. They feel that.
Yeah.
I have a story in the book where I was talking about walking down the street and I spoke to a young African American male, and he was so taken aback because nobody ever spoke to him. Nobody ever speaks to him. So they know how society views them and sees them. My goal is how do you see yourself and letting them know how God sees them as well.
And do you find that that approach sort of helps them navigate society more effectively?
I think so. I think
Yeah.
so. If you can be confident in yourself, it's kind of like the way that I was raised, being biracial in the 70s.
Yeah.
My mom told me, and I shared that story. My mom told me,
Yeah.
you have the best of both worlds. If someone has a problem with you, that's their problem. Learning that at an early age helped me to navigate racism, helped me to navigate when people would see me differently or call me different names or challenge me on my identity. But because I had that foundation of knowing who I was, that helps a lot. So I think when these young people get an idea of who they are in Christ, it makes all the difference in how they put themselves out there.
Yeah, it's interesting how often it comes back to that. I've had so many conversations with people on the podcast,
Mm,
and we'll talk about it. There's a gentleman who wrote a book called Failure of Nerve. It's a leadership book by a guy named Friedman.
okay.
It's really fantastic. If you haven't read it, I'd recommend it. But he talks about it in terms of being a self-differentiated leader, and the way he defines that is you have to understand where you end and other people begin. And so your
Mm,
goal is to be a non-anxious presence. You can't take on everybody else's emotional baggage and expect to do well, be sort of the antidote to anxiety within your context. And so
right.
it
Right.
strikes me that you're giving these kids like something very similar to that.
Yeah.
This is who you are. This is the way you should perceive yourself. This is the way you understand your actions. This is how you sort of own your own space.
Yeah.
And when other people
Yeah.
are trying to pierce that with their own fears or anxiety or frustrations or stereotypes or whatever, you don't have to worry about that because that's
Right.
that's a them problem. All you're doing is living your life. You're being who you are, and you can prove them wrong over the long term if they're
Right.
willing to listen. That
Right.
kind of idea,
And if you care, right, what
right?
others
If you
think.
care, right?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, telling these young people that, you're the hero of your own life. This is your story. Um, I'm just a supporting actor. You're the lead role, right? And
Yeah.
so that is key in giving them that type of autonomy, giving them that type of empowerment to just be like, yes, this is my life. I am the hero. What people think and say, I get to choose how that affects me in the long haul. Unfortunately, they're teenagers. They don't think like that.
Yeah.
They
Right.
react, they
Yeah. Yeah.
respond, they're emotional.
Yeah.
So trying to get them to that point, takes time. It takes time. You have to be patient.
Yeah, I see that. I mean, I have three teenagers right now.
Oh,
And so
mercy. God bless you.
yeah, yeah. My son just
Father,
went to
the Son, and the
college,
Holy
and then
Spirit.
I have twin
Ooh,
girls, 15-year-old twin girls.
ooh.
So
Wow.
yeah, and then we have a 3-year-old. We're adopting a 3-year-old. But the
Oh, nice.
teenagers have been interesting.
Yeah.
especially in the social media age and, all that kind
Right.
of stuff going on. It is very, very hard to get
Yeah.
them to open up and understand
Yeah.
things and like work with them on different stuff. I mean, my kids and me get along well, but there's still that wall, right, where they're not sure how to process all these things and they don't really know what's coming.
Right.
I think
Right.
that's
And I think
a
that's
big part
key
of
to
it.
having a mentor in their life, right?
Yeah.
The somebody that they can fall back on when they can't talk to their parents, and having
Yeah.
that mentor have a relationship with the parents. I think it's all
Yeah.
full circle. They say it takes a village to raise a kid, and I say it takes a kingdom to raise these kids, this generation. So as many positive role models as we can get in a kid's life, then the healthier it is for them.
So how do you see, I mean, you talk about, it takes a kingdom to raise these kids, and I
Yeah.
tend to agree. I mean, I think the churches we've gone to and the people that we've interacted with have built into my children's lives, and I've so appreciated that because I think they do need a voice other than mine. My
Yeah,
voice is going to get old.
absolutely.
Right. At some point it's like I'm getting the eye rolls or whatever. And it's like, oh geez, dad
You're the
again. But when it's
dad,
someone
right?
else,
Right,
it's actually really
right,
helpful.
right.
So how do you see in your ministry, how do you see churches really stepping up to be mentors to these kids? How do you see them welcoming them into the church community? Maybe what could be done better?
I mean, and that's very difficult, honestly. I mean, if I can be really honest,
Yeah,
the church really doesn't. I'm trying to be
it's
nice.
okay.
The church really doesn't like my kind of kids.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
don't really accept my kind of youth.
yeah,
Um, and I think that is a big, big problem.
yeah,
We have young people that are incarcerated and they're coming home and they
yeah,
want change.
yeah,
They don't want to continue living the lives that they live that have ended them up separated from their families, in a dark place called prison. The churches need to be open and welcoming to that. Churches need training.
yeah,
Churches need to seek God about what He's calling them to do concerning families that have someone that is incarcerated. And I think it starts there. Start with your own church
yeah,
and see who in your church. I mean, if 1 in 3 Black men are going to be involved in the system, 1 in 5 Latinos, Hispanic men are involved in the prison system. If the fastest growing population are women, and if the largest population are white women who are incarcerated, they're coming home, they're coming back to us. Someone in your church is dealing with incarceration. And so finding that person, whether it's their child, their brother, an uncle, a friend, um, it's not as far removed from the church as people would think.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But we're not taking the time to know our neighbors,
Is it
even
in
in the
this?
church context.
Yeah, I was going to say that it strikes me that it's easy to be anonymous in most of the churches I've been to.
Yes. I see you
And
on Sunday, but outside of that,
right,
and we're good friends on Sundays,
right. But otherwise,
but
yeah,
otherwise,
yeah,
I don't know what's going on in your life, right?
right. Yeah, if you could not call me to help you move, that'd be fantastic. That'd
Right.
be great. Um,
Right, exactly,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. You don't even
We're
want to pick up
right,
chairs in church, let alone help a neighbor move, right?
right. So that anonymity, I mean, the lack of community within the church walls,
Yeah,
the sort of we could call it a lack of neighborliness, I suppose. And it's more of a familiarity than a relationship. I
right,
recognize that
right,
you sit in that seat most Sundays, and that's great for
right,
you, kind
right.
of idea. And
No, it's true.
right. And since you
And
don't
that's
keep
not
me
a
from
very
sitting in my
welcoming,
seat,
right,
great.
right, exactly. Oh,
Right.
don't start with that.
Right.
Sitting in my seat.
And so
And that's not very welcoming.
it's
Um,
not.
and it wouldn't be welcoming to my kind of youth or families.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to think through because I mean, my initial reaction when you were talking through that was I wanted to ask, do you find that churches think that these youth are somehow dangerous, that
Oh yeah.
they're risking the other kids that they're trying to minister to in bringing them in. But then maybe that's a deeper symptom of, look, we just don't care about people at all. And
Yeah.
the kids that we like to have around are the ones that don't really cause us that much trouble.
I think so I think it's a combination of things, right? I think it's a combination of
Yeah.
what you're saying. I think I think churches do care. I think they just don't know how to.
Okay.
I think that if one of my young people walked in the church with his family, um, they might not know how to receive them.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that they don't care. It just means we are not used to this. What do we do? How do we do this?
Yeah.
Um, you do have churches that don't care and just want what's simple too, and
Right.
just don't come in and ruffle my ministry and shake things up and don't, like
Yeah.
we have our way of doing things, we have our rules. Don't
Right.
come in here cursing with your pants sagging and like
Right.
smelling like weed. Whereas for me, I welcome that. I'm like, yes, if you smell like weed and want to come to church,
Yeah.
right? I'd rather you be here than out there.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think there needs to be a lot of training, and people just don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I can remember times when like I'd meet somebody from high school or something like that. I remember one interaction specifically. I ran into somebody that I knew in high school and we ended the conversation and I just said, "Hey, this has been really awkward, man."
I love
Like,
it. That's
because
real. That's
it
real.
was horribly awkward. We didn't you like we you like lock eyes with somebody, you're like, oh man, this is gonna happen
Right,
now.
right.
But we have nothing to say to each other. It's like,
But
oh,
you
that was
pressed through the
awkward.
awkwardness. You
Right.
did.
Right. And I think so I can definitely see what you're saying. So when you're saying training on how to welcome these folks, that's
Yeah.
really what you're saying. Like how do we welcome them? How do we get past some of our own I don't know.
Stuff.
Yeah, whatever we call it stuff, right? Yeah. Like I don't think anybody who smells like weed should be in church. And it's like, well, yeah, if you've been coming to church for 50 years and you're still coming smelling like weed, maybe we should have a conversation about
Or
that.
at right.
Right.
Exactly.
But if this is
Exactly.
your first time here, like, and you
Right.
come in smelling like weed, we should just be happy you made it through the door. Like,
Exactly.
and so we need to recalibrate some of that. And that's the sort of training you're talking about within the church. Is that a
Right.
fair?
And being able to see people the way God sees them. And
Yeah.
it's simple as that. Stop making the judgments, stop making the assumptions, get to know the stories, find out why he smells like weed. I mean, well, we know why he smells like weed, but there's a deeper
Yeah.
story to that, right?
Right. Right.
There's a deeper story.
Yeah.
Um, and so we're just so quick to want things to fit into our bubble, and I just don't think God is pleased with that.
Yeah. I
Sometimes
think
I
that
don't smoke weed, but sometimes I just want to spray weed all over me and walk into a church just to get a reaction. I really, really
it's an
do.
experiment.
It is an experiment, exactly, to see what happens.
Well, one of the things that struck me in your book, because I really enjoyed, like, you move from seeing yourself to seeing others,
Yeah,
right? That you
exactly.
kind of move back and forth. And just as we're having the conversation here, it kind of strikes me that when we don't see ourselves the way God sees us, we can't see others the way God sees them. And so
Right.
even if we think about, I can remember times when I would have been the equivalent of walking into a church smelling like weed. I didn't
Hmm.
smell like weed. I still looked the part a little better,
Sure, sure.
but just because there were no visible signs that I was doing, things that were prone to mess up my life, didn't mean I
Hmm.
wasn't doing things that were prone to mess up my
Right,
life.
right. You just
But it was
covered it
much
well.
easier for me to walk in and just say, "Hey, everybody, I'm here.
Exactly.
Isn't this great?" And people would generally leave me alone and wouldn't even question whether I was okay or not.
Right, right.
And so I think channeling that sort of story, like remembering how messed up I was, where I've come from, where God has brought me from, could actually be helpful. Is that
Absolutely.
so? How do we get to that point of sort of self exploration within the church where it's not just you know what I mean? It's not just, yeah, I'm saved. And so now everybody should be saved and you should act like this. And if you don't, I have no time for you.
And, that is such an individual choice to say, I want to go deeper and heal, or I want to continue to pretend and fake it. Um, I think if you fully want to walk this life, if you really want to be healed, if you want the abundance of it and the freedom and the peace, you have to look inward. You have to do the work. You have to seek God and ask Him, what do you see? What am I called to do? Why was I created? I mean, all of these, the same things we want our kids to figure out. If we
Yeah.
don't have that figured out, why are we asking our young people to have that figured out? And so the time of, because eventually the pretending, you're going to break. It's
Yeah.
exhausting pretending.
Yeah.
It's exhausting being someone that you're not. I know I've done it. I've been there. It is exhausting, and eventually you break, and the break usually isn't pretty.
Yeah.
So the self-exploration it's an individual choice, and in order to be fully free and at peace with who you are in God, you've got to do it. You've got to go through that.
Yeah. You mentioned in the book, it's almost like you're giving people advice on how to go about engaging youth, and I think just others
Yeah,
in general, honestly.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One of the things you say is, change the way you view an unbelieving teen.
Yes.
And so, I think intuitively I understand that. I think I'm wondering if you can give a few of them nuts and bolts on how that might work. Again,
Yeah.
it's because there is a lot of vulnerability that's going to be required to maybe not change the way you just understand them, look at them like rationally, but
Yeah.
then to move beyond that rational understanding of, oh yeah, I know they've had a hard life, to actually engaging with someone who has lived that life
Live
and
that life.
and
Yeah.
doing so in an appropriate way.
Well, I think one of the main things is that, and this is one of my favorite chapters in the book, um, where you have to come to understand that people are not projects to be fixed,
Yeah.
period. So the way that you look at a person, not just a young person, but the way that you look at a person is not as a project
Yeah.
that you have to figure out and that you have to fix. The way that we should look at a teen is that they do have their own stories. They do have the ability to make good choices. They are in control of their lives and their situations and who they are and what they believe. We need to empower them. We need to walk with them as they figure this out, but not like they're a project that I need to be fixed. This is a young person I need to tell what to do, how to do it, what God is saying about their life. We don't know what God is saying about their life. We don't know what God is going to do in and through their life, but we can walk with them as they're trying to figure it out, right? So giving them the power to explore that instead of telling them, um, leading them into what we think. Because again, our lens is very limited. Our experiences, we see others through our experiences, so we have to be really careful how we view people from the jump, from the beginning.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Again, I kind of go back to an experience with my kids. You know, I've started thinking about it in terms of I have to let them make the mistakes that they're going to make.
Sure, sure, and
You
that's
know,
hard.
yeah.
That's
I
hard to
mean,
let
and
them when you can stop them.
right. And I mean, I could stop them, and I'm always trying to figure out, okay, how do I let them trip without, having to go get stitches or,
Right,
you know what I mean? Like,
exactly, exactly,
but there has to be that they have to become who they are. They can't be me. And
exactly,
I think that's really challenging with kids. I think it's challenging with anybody, I suppose, because the tendency is just to say, well, this works for me. It's going to work for you.
exactly.
But
Which
I
is
think
not
that hasn't really played out for me very well. As I've,
right. I was going to say, how did that work out for you?
it doesn't,
Right,
it doesn't ever
exactly.
work.
Never, never.
I don't know whether you've read any of the work on, and it kind of ended badly, but the L'Arche communities. Are you
Mm-mm.
familiar with the L'Arche communities? A
No.
lot of theologians, probably it's been within the last decade, but L'Arche used to be run by a gentleman named Jean Vanier. And like I
Okay.
said, ended kind of problematically. There were some allegations that people were taking advantage of, but he was living and creating communities for people with various sorts of disabilities.
Okay.
And different Christian theologians would go and they would live in these communities. And most of them, when they went, they said, my perception was that I was going to be helping out a lot. When they
Mm,
left, their perception was, I can't believe how much I've grown being around these really special people.
right. Right.
And it just strikes me that the work that you're
Yeah.
doing could have a very similar story to it. Like people who are
Absolutely.
going in, they go in and they think, wow, these people need a lot of help, but
The
they almost
savior
have to
complex,
walk out.
right?
Right. But then they almost have to walk out going, oh my gosh, I've learned, like they added to my life as much, if not more, than I added to theirs.
Exactly. And we're community. We're a community. So we have to do this together. So I
Yeah.
go in, I have a relationship, a very strong relationship with a gang leader. And he knows that I'm a Christian and he knows that one day, I think he's gonna be a pastor. And but we're in this thing together. So he teaches me, I teach him. It's not about me having this savior complex of needing to figure out his life and you need to do this or turn or burn or all those different kind of things that he has
Yeah.
experienced with other Christians. But knowing that we're walking in this together, and I'm like, I have learned so much
Yeah.
about it has helped me do what I do better with other young people. But I was open to that. I
Yeah.
wasn't going in with this, I'm here to save you.
Yeah.
Um, he has his own relationship with God. That's none of my business. That's not my relationship.
Yeah.
But please teach me. And I learned so much from these young people. I love it. I can't do what I do without learning from them.
Do you find that I'm going to assume that your aims don't always overlap, but I mean, I think the perception, I'll just give my perception, right?
Yeah, yeah.
My perception would be that we probably have gangs in part incorrect. Like this is just my stereotype from the movies and stuff like that. We talked about it earlier, right? There's an aspect to the gangs where I think they are actually trying to do something good for the neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah. And that's how it
And
started. Hmm.
yeah, and so there is a sort of an interesting core to it that's like we need this community, we need this togetherness, we need this solidarity. Now it takes a really hard turn and bad
Right.
turn, I think, in a lot of ways. But when you
Yes.
talk about collaborating with a gang leader, I'm wondering, is that kind of how you collaborate? That core, hey, we want what's good for the neighborhood kind of idea. Is that where you find synergy with them, or how does that
Well,
work?
I find that it's about their young people that are involved in their gang.
Okay.
Like they don't want their young people to die. That's their family.
Yeah.
They've developed a community within themselves. They've developed this closeness where they depend on each other and they need each other. So it's its own community. So when I collaborate with the gang leader, it's for the betterment of the young people that are involved in his particular gang, right? And
Yeah.
for him and his family. And
Yeah.
and it for me it bleeds into the community and the safety of the community.
Yeah.
For them it's about safety of their own community, of their gang.
So there is a pretty strong sort of us versus them kind of stance within the gang still. Even in
With the
relationship to the community
church,
or with the
with the
church. Okay.
church, there's
Okay.
very much a us versus them. Um, and it doesn't it in a lot of situations it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be that way. Um, but I think they also feel it with the community, but
Okay.
not as much as they do with the church.
The church really is that sort of against us sort of group that just
Right.
wants to clean us up and put us in positions that we know won't work.
Right, exactly.
That kind of
Either get
idea.
rid of us or convert us.
Yeah,
You know,
that's what the church wants.
right, exactly. Exactly. And that's very you can see why it's very hard um for young people to then come to the church, which is why we have to go to where they are. which
Yeah.
is why I go into the prisons or go on the street corner. Um, they're more than likely not going to come to us, especially
Do you,
this generation.
do you have churches that are good to work with you? I mean, that you can plug these kids into, or is that just not even something that you look
That's
to?
just not existent.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, I have a
Yeah.
hard time, and I know they're out there. I know
Yeah.
there are some that are out there. There has to be. Um, but my little circle or trying to figure out
Sure.
and a lot of times, you have to find a church that is in the neighborhood where they live because they can't cross gang borders. It's not safe
Right.
for them to go to the north side if they're a
Right.
gang on the west side and their rivals are around that church. I mean, so there's lots of other things to think about, not
Yeah.
just a church that accepts them, but a church that is safe for them.
Safe for them.
And then you
Yeah.
want to keep the church safe too, right? So you don't want
Yeah.
drive-bys to happen, or they'd be like, oh, such and such is at that church, we're gonna wait for him outside. Like, you don't, you have to keep the
Right.
church safe too. So there are
Yeah.
lots of different things that play into that. I remember when I moved into the gang neighborhood, there were literally 6 churches within 2 blocks, and I reached out to every single church and they just didn't want anything to do with what I was doing. So that was very heartbreaking for me, because at that
Yeah.
point I'm like, Lord, I tried, like, what do I do? What if I have a kid that wants to go to church? Where do I take him?
Yeah.
And that's safe, because
Right.
there were a couple of churches that were like, absolutely, bring your young people, but it wasn't safe.
Yeah.
So I had this one church where we did basketball with them, and we had to take them out of our community to go to this particular church. So we would have to have tinted windows on the van. We'd have to take main streets. You couldn't take side streets. You couldn't let the kids know where we were going because they might call up somebody and say, meet us over here. I mean, all of
Yeah.
these different things you have to think about when it comes to youth being able to attend certain churches. So people don't think about things like that.
No, lots of practicalities there. Just
Right. To
tons of
keep everybody
complexity.
safe. Hmm.
Yeah, to keep everybody safe.
Exactly.
Well, like I said, I appreciate you writing the book. I usually end these sessions or my episodes with just a question, and so I'm really interested to hear what your answer is going to be to it.
Okay.
Okay, so what do you think the church needs to be thinking about today in order to be and make disciples more faithfully?
Hmm. That is a really great question. I think the church needs to think about being open to those that know nothing about our church culture.
Hmm.
I think the church has its own culture, and a lot of times people from the outside are unaware, don't know how to navigate that. And I think we need to be very careful of the culture that we develop and be more open to those that are coming from outside, um, that are looking for hope, that are looking for light. Uh, we have to be more open and less arrogant.
And you kind of mentioned that in the book. You talk about watching your
Yeah,
language,
yeah,
not using that church jargon, which would obviously be part of culture, and
right, exactly,
making sure we're not shutting people down before they even get a chance to understand what we're talking about.
exactly,
Yeah. So the first thing
exactly.
we ask is, so what about limited atonement? And they're like,
I mean, my kids would be like,
what?
"What?
You're right.
This is not the place for me." They literally would just
Right.
turn around and walk out.
Yeah. I don't know.
And not just the Christianese, but then also what we call people, right? And so I
Yeah.
don't call people felons. They're people
Mm,
with felony records.
I
I
see.
don't
Yeah. Yeah.
say a gang member. I say a young person involved in gang culture. So even what we
Mm,
call people, don't call them ex-cons, don't call them convicts, don't call like these are people, God's people that he loves and cares for deeply. And so what we call people, in addition to the language that we use when we invite them in, can make all the difference.
yeah. Very cool. That's a great answer. Well,
Thank you. You
I
got me on that one. You got me.
no, I really did enjoy the book. I love the stories.
Thank
I
you.
think again, having kind of grown up in Chicago, we went to a variety of churches when we were up there, and so some of them you could tell. I mean, the people I'd take with me were sometimes uncomfortable,
Sure.
and so but you could tell that other churches just weren't built for the kind of folks you're serving. And so I think your ministry is
Exactly.
absolutely crucial and necessary. And I'm just so
Aw, thank
pleased that
you.
God brought you to it. So,
Thank you so
um,
much.
folks, if you're looking for a great book, a great read, worth seeing, viewing others through God's eyes, I think it's applicable even for those who aren't anywhere near gang culture. This is
Absolutely.
just about really and truly seeing other people through God's eyes. And we all encounter other people, hopefully. If you're listening to this, I can guarantee you do. So I really highly recommend it. We'll put the link in the show notes as well as any other links that we have to Amy. And just really appreciate you. And thanks so much for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. This was so much fun. It was great.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. We'll catch you on the next episode of Thinking Christian. Just want to take a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on the Thinking Christian podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
Hey, I'm Jeff King, the president of Persecution.org and the host of Faith Under Fire, where we examine threats to the faith and the transformative spiritual lessons of the persecuted church. If you're a deep Christian looking for life-changing content or just trying to make sense of political attacks on the faith, come listen to Faith Under Fire.